Hello, everyone, and welcome to this breakout of Leaving No One Behind. I will just wait a couple of minutes because there are still some people that are choosing which breakouts to go into. So in a couple of minutes, we'll begin. Okay, it seems that most people have now chosen their breakout. So can I just welcome Andrea and Isabella, our two speakers, to turn on your video, please. Hello, welcome. So the format of the breakout today will be we'll have 3 talks. So we've got first Isabella, who will speak for around 10 minutes, and then we go to Andrea, and then back to Isabella again. And then we will end with a discussion session. So you can yeah, as you're watching the talks, just keep in mind any questions that you'd like to ask for our speakers. We'll save them all for the end rather than having questions after each talk. So yeah, it's meant to be an interactive session, so we hope to have a nice discussion. And so you can put your questions in the chat, but if the group stays small like this, I might invite some of you to also speak if you want to ask your questions out loud. So for now, I will hand over to Isabella for our first talk. And would you like to introduce yourself as well, Isabella, and tell us which institute you come from?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that introduction, Britt. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Thank you. I'm Isabela Katime. I'm the head of the scientific communication team at the Marine and Coastal Research Institute. Good morning from this side of the world because I'm from Colombia, and that's it. Can I start with the presentation or?
Yeah, you can go ahead with your talk. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, let me just a minute just to share my screen. Can you see that?
Good, thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you. As I said before, I'm Isabela Katime, the head of the scientific communication team at the Marine and Coastal Research Institute. Today I'm going to talk about this beautiful project, and it's a scientific communication experience with deaf people in Colombia that we call Ocean in Sign. This communication was elaborated by other authors also. They are Paula Sierra, the head of Marine and Research and Information, and researchers like Yureli Lopez and Laura Herran. Laura is a deaf woman. Okay, the project considers 2 elements. As we know, the Ocean Decade outcome is one of the Ocean Decade outcomes is focused on accessible ocean. And it was related with the availability of information to all audiences in different formats and languages. So that regardless of a geographic origin, language, or age, they can hit the call to action. But also, depending on the ocean and seeking its conservation, it's not an exclusive task of those who live near to the coast. Understanding that every continental action has repercussions on the sea. And there is a highlight about if the ocean is not known, it will be difficult to value and to care for it in the appropriate way. That's why we try to focus on this topic. Just to put you in context, there are more than 300,000 of deaf people in Colombia, less than 1% of the country's population. And this information is according with the census made by the National Department of Statistics in 2018. Then the project made some surveys to deaf community in Santa Marta and San Andres. Santa Marta is a coastal city, and San Andres is an island. And as a result, we found that 75% population in Santa Marta and 73% in San Andres has not received education on marine issues. All of it, of course, is a consequence of the deaf people have not access to education, There is not an educational material or vocabulary associated, and the lack of tools that allow an adequate teaching. So the conditions for deaf people are unequal in terms of access to knowledge and education. Ocean in Sign is the first project in the country to offer marine education to the deaf community and to generate a vocabulary about the ocean. Joreli and Laura developed their thesis in the bachelor process, and they tried to create an ocean vocabulary in Colombian Sign Language. We must understand that the sign language is not universal. It works like languages or accents. So here's the challenge. Translate the scientific knowledge in an accessible format for the deaf community. So the project developed 4 phases. The first phase was a diagnosis. More than 40 surveys was followed, 15 in San Andres and around 30 in Santa Marta. The age range was between 22 and 56 in San Andres and 17 and 62 years old in Santa Marta. These surveys were made in a digital format, full of image and video in Colombian Sign Language. The second phase was the ocean literacy workshops. And in this phase, we made an exchange of experiences, provided direct contact with marine and coastal ecosystems. We use our Marine and Natural History Museum, as you can see in this photo, and opened the discussion of signs about the ocean, reaching a total of 150 signs. For San Andres, for example, it was necessary to hold a specific workshop of mangroves, considering the importance of this ecosystem for the archipelago in order to protect the people from different natural hazards, as hurricanes, for example. The third phase was recording and dissemination strategy. At that time, we established a two-way dissemination strategy for deaf and hearing people. We built a vocabulary, as I said before, of 150 signs. Now, all of them are available on Inbemar's YouTube channel. And the workshops about Colombian Sign Language were developed for hearing people. At that time, I want to share an experience. If the deaf people came to our institute and they create a sign for our institute. When you know a deaf person, they create a sign for you. For example, I have my own sign and it's not the same for all Isabelas around the world. So they made the sign for Inbemar and it's this one. It is about the ocean, it's about the research, and it's about our logo composition. So it was very, very amazing. And I want to highlight something is that under the ocean, we all communicate in sign. And there is a fourth phase that was implement the dissemination strategy. In that phase, we realized that record a sign and share the video on our social networks was not enough. That's why we started to create a series of explanatory videos highlighting the interesting facts and information about the topic. These videos are available on our social networks, Facebook and Instagram. And finally, just to let you know that Ocean Sign aims to expand the sign vocabulary and keep working on deaf people literacy and to be a reference for other similar projects around the world. Of course, some acknowledgements, thanks to Laura and Joreli, their dreams start to be, and of course, to Inbemar for all the logistic and economic supports. Just to let you know, there's some videos. The first video is about the explanatory video. Yeah, thank you so much. That's it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Isabella. That is really fascinating. Yeah, to hear about this this new language, developed new sign language for oceans. So yeah, I will save my questions for a bit later as well, and we can move on to Andrea now for your talk.
I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see it and hear me well?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Souza. I'm a researcher at the University of Lisbon as well as University of the Azores, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about an arts and science project with cetacean species, which are whales, dolphins, and porpoises species in the community of the Azores. So this project aims to join both arts and science and aims to utilize cetacean vocalizations, so the sounds produced by these animals, and work with these sounds together with the community of the Azores to create an artistic performance for ocean conservation. And so the project takes place in São Miguel, in the archipelago of the Azores, which is an archipelago located in the North Atlantic Ocean. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of how this project came about. So I'm a biologist, I'm a researcher on cetacean species and on the topic of climate change as well. And I met my two colleagues, Monica and Gianna, who are teachers in the local music school. And so I'm a biologist passionate about music, and my colleagues are two musicians passionate about the ocean and about the species. And so this project is also a project, or is mainly a project developed with the local community. And so everyone was welcomed to join and participate in the project. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the motivations of the people who are participating in this project. And so one of the persons that's participating is Andrea Ferreira, and she wanted to join the project because she was looking or she was interested in knowing how we would connect these two areas of both arts and science. And she also wanted to connect with people in the community and improve their relation or the relation of humankind with the ocean throughout time. This was something that many participants mentioned, this need of having activities in the island to meet other people. This was important. Another participant, which is Rita Andrade, she was also curious about how we would join both the underwater worlds as well as to different art forms. And she wanted to participate in the project because she mentioned that she would be able to learn and increase her awareness for the urgency of doing something positive for the ocean. And finally, Raquel was also very curious how we would join these two areas. And Raquel mentions that both cetaceans and the ocean always brought very polarized feelings to her, that the ocean is something that both separates and unites, particularly being in an island, that cetaceans are very strong, large animals, but they're also fragile to human actions, and that the ocean to her meant fear, and this was related to a series of cultural and historical aspects, mainly related to the loss of fishermen's lives and immigration. But she feels that today the ocean is able to bring her closer to the different species, particularly the cetacean species. And so the project started, the project has three phases, and the first phase was the collection of acoustic data. So the participants made boat trips where they could listen to the sounds produced by these species. So whales and dolphins produce a variety of sounds that are used for reproduction, communication, feeding activities. And so participants could hear live when we were watching the animals, we could also hear them. And so here in the right-hand side, There is Roberto with a hydrophone, which is a underwater microphone that's able to record these sounds. And then Rita here is listening to the sounds when we're closer to the animals. And I'm just going to show you an example of sperm whale clicks. These are called codas, and codas are a series patterns of clicks that are used for communication. And hopefully you can hear them. If you can't, please let me know. Another example of some of the acoustic data we have collected are whistles. Here we have an example of different whistles that were recorded in a feeding activity, and these are common dolphin whistles. And so the following process was to take these sounds and explore different artistic processes using these sounds, not only mimicking, but also interacting and improvising with these sounds. And so together with the community and with the students from the local music school, we began a series of artistic workshops to work together with these sounds, and I will just show you a brief exercise that we made. We also made some visual experiments. And here we have the participants testing different visual experiments to accompany the sounds and the experiences developed with the sound. And the end goal is to have a final performance as a result of this, of all these artistic workshops and processes that have been taking place. And I want to thank all of you and for listening. We also have a range of dates when the final performance will be presented to the public, which will be between the 20th and 30th of April. Once we know the exact date, we will disseminate through our social media, which you can find here as well as in the project website. And you're all very welcome and invited to come to São Miguel in the Azores to watch the final performance. I would like to, just to finish, to thank you, the local music school, as well as the whale watching company that is supporting us with the boat trips, and to the UN Ocean Decade for endorsing this project. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Yeah, that was super interesting as well. It's always very nice to see these art science collaborative projects. So we will, I also have some questions for you, but we'll wait until the discussion session. So we'll move on to the final talk, going back to Isabela. Hello, Isabela.
Hi again.
Hello. So yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Ready?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to talk about MAPCO, a communication strategy for ecosystem positioning in local communities. In a literary translation to Spanish, MAPCO means mangrove, seagrasses, and local communities. It was an environmental action developed between 2017 and 2021 and covered the coastal marine zone of Sucre, Córdoba, La Guajira, and San Andrés y Providencia. Territories with more than 13% of mangroves and 85% of the seagrasses in the Colombian Caribbean. In addition, these departments are home for 5 marine protected areas where the country has some challenges in managing and conserving ecosystem services. MAPCO was a regional initiative co-funded by European Union, INVEMAR, and Fundación Natura, and coordinated by INVEMAR with the collaboration with other national and international entities to promote knowledge and conservation of marine and coastal biodiversity. Since 2017 and for 5 years, through a strong communication strategy related to the empowerment of communities, the involvement of key stakeholders, knowledge management, support by communication actions, the dissemination of progress, results, and lessons learned through institutional synergies, MAPCO was able to maintain an active interest and strengthen the importance of traditional and ancestral knowledge for the conservation of marine and coastal ecosystems. More than 90 workshops were held with the community, 7 exchange of experience between local communities. For example, this one was between mangrove people from the Caribbean and mangrove people from the Pacific coast. And the workspaces fostered between young people and women. One of the flagships activities during the project was the Mangrove Legacy, an activity where the young people received knowledge and carry out a symbolic generational handover to assume the commitment to continue caring for this vital ecosystem. A huge challenge that the action had to face up was the pandemic situation. At that time, the project suspended its activities in the territory and some workshops were rescheduled or moved to a virtual format, but the communications couldn't stop. Therefore, a parallel communication plan was activated, encouraging young people, women, and others and to use and manage content from the project on our social networks. As a result, we received several videos of children motivating conservation, reciting a poem, talking about mangroves and their ecosystem benefits, and many others. In addition, all live conversations could transmit the exchange of experience between communities. We had an experience with the Semu indigenous community and the sale of experience with other projects in the region. As a result, an important increase in social networks, new followers, and an average of 27,000 accounts were impacted through digital campaigns that include these live events. MAPCO also materialized many of its results in joint publications resulting from this intimate experience with the community. Well, the capacity building through communication. On the one hand, national and international environmental journalists were brought to the territory to enhance the voice of the communities. And the other hand, the ecotourism associations also participate in a space that taught how to maximize the use of social networks to promote ecotourism and the services they provide in the area in a post-pandemic context. In the process, we provide them with tools for best practices in managing these channels. These activities impact 170 members of 5 ecotourism associations in the Gulf of Morrosquillo, one of which comprised 90% women. The information from the project allowed the action to be awarded in a space that sought to highlight conservation or environmental management projects. MAPCO won an award from a national media outlet and took 8th place in the ocean category of the Latin America Green Awards, where more than 2,000 environmental projects were evaluated. The action was also shown as an inspiring case in different scenarios, such as the COP13 Ramsar and other 27 scientific events. Finally, the main objective of the strategy was to promote knowledge and conservation of biodiversity, especially ecosystems such as mangroves and seagrasses, maintained an improved perception from 74, it was high, in 2017 to a positive perception of 84% in 2021. The MAPCO initiative contributed to the community expanding their knowledge about mangroves and seagrasses and their benefits. And as a result, they moved from defining the mangrove or seagrasses as a space for resource extraction to an important ecosystem for biodiversity, providing services such as oxygen and protection against coastal erosion. MAPCO was able to generate change in the behavior of local, subnational, national, and regional communities towards mangrove and seagrass ecosystems, which leads directly to conservation and sustainable use of their biodiversity. This was possible thanks to the education actions and communication strategy implemented through the project. If you want to download the book, there's a QR code and also about the mangrove legacy. The video is in Spanish, but it is available in our YouTube channel.
So much, Isabela, again for another very interesting talk. So now we move on to the discussion session. So you're welcome to put your questions in the chat that you have for Andrea and Isabela. And I will start off with a couple of questions of my own. Are you still there, Isabela? Can you put your camera on? Yeah, there we go. So I was wondering, you mentioned that there was some tools for best practices developed. So I assume these were sort of best practices for engaging with journalists or ecotourism, or sort of these digital tools and social media that were prominent in this project. So what kind of best practices or what kind of recommendations were made, and can you share any of those with the audience here that might also be looking to engage more with local communities?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we realized that the ecotourism associations, they use Facebook, for example, to offer their services, their ecotourism services, but they were not using the tool very well. I mean, maybe some awful, just to use an adjective, photos, or no more information, not a lot of descriptions, and there's not enough information for tourists. And we realized that we can provide some tools and to help them to create content, interest content for their social networks, and some photos, some images, recreate the logo, for example, of the ecotourism associations, and we learn them to use Facebook tools, for example.
Yeah, and what would you consider interesting content? What were your tips for them for developing engaging content on social media?
Well, maybe content related with some experience when you are making ecotourism.
Yeah.
some videos about experience, some experience for other tourists that go to the Gulf of Morrosquillo and know about mangroves. We
Yeah.
only see like a huge forest of mangroves, but we don't know a lot of benefits that they have, blue carbon or and
Yeah.
others biological benefits that they have.
Yeah. Great. So I have a question here in the chat for Andrea, actually. So it's from Maria Vittoria Mara. And she says, are the community members involved in the music production part of the project as well, or just the professional musicians?
Yeah, the community is also exploring some in some of the workshops with music, so not just the professionals, and also the students of the music school that of course have a bigger musical background. But what it was interesting was that, at least I found, that people have many hobbies and many talents that sometimes are very hidden. And so we have people that work with music, that play a little from their hobbies, but also people that don't. And for those, of course, we have an approach for them to be able to participate and enjoy this musical aspect of the performance together with other people that know a bit more. And also other people that draw, that make very beautiful drawings. And so one of the interesting things I think about the project was to be able to get to know people in the community better and what they do, and to be able to integrate those interests in the actual performance.
Yeah. And did you sort of measure any but I suppose you haven't had the performances yet, so you haven't been able to measure any impact of the project, but do you have plans to sort of collect any information on that?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Actually, this is a very pilot project. So I'm a biologist that met these two colleagues of mine that are musicians, and so there's a lot that we feel that we can do and wanted to do. Perhaps if we can do this in a second edition, to actually get some more data and information about this awareness and what things worked better than others, and how effective, if you want, this aspect of awareness and engaging with ocean issues actually is. Because I think I can speak for all of us. We have a perception, but it would be for sure relevant to collect this data more consistently. And if there is someone interested that actually works in this field, and please reach out. It would be great to collaborate with other people as well.
Yeah. And I'm curious as well how you've found the process of working with these musicians, and sort of what are the similarities and differences that you found in working between scientists and artists, and have you found anything surprising in that process, or have you learned anything in particular?
Yeah, I think that there is maybe something common, which may be a bit obvious, but I mean, as scientists and as musicians as well. I mean, the musicians that I'm speaking of are actually the students from the music school, but we both have, both science and both the students, how to say this, a way that we work. So we have kind of a defined framework of how we work. And one of the exercises that we did with the students was to explore their instrument in unconventional ways. So to try in the first stage to mimic some of the sounds that the species make, and then try to make as well a composition by interacting with those sounds, so not just mimicking. And this made the students think and try to create in a different way, using different parts of the instrument that they're not used to do, to create new sounds. And so this was interesting. And so to kind of break free from these structures that of course are necessary, either really research or music.
Mm-hmm.
But this was an interesting aspect to to be a bit free of those and explore other ways.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's super interesting. But I've got quite a few questions coming into the chat here. So going back to Isabella, we have a question from Jessica Bellworthy. She says, what was your motivation for working with the deaf community? And what are your tips for finding people in that community who wish to engage with scientists?
Oh, well, I met Laura and Joreli when they were presenting their thesis, and I was fascinated. We contacted them and hired them at the Institute to support this initiative. Finding deaf people interested in science is not difficult, but education is maybe the main thing. The ocean is very visual and interesting indeed. And for example, in this exchange of experiences, deaf people from Bogota, that is not a coastal city, came to Santa Marta, and many of them didn't know the sea. It was such a beautiful, beautiful experience. So just imagine that we here and we don't know enough about the ocean, and we can access to all the resources. Imagine someone who can hear. And I think maybe I'm so excited talking about that project, but it's really, really beautiful to share with deaf people and to know that we know a lot, we can access to all educational tools and vocabulary, and but they can't because there's not enough material for them. In our case, in Colombian Sign Language. And actually, I learned a little bit of sign language.
Yeah.
I had to.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. And are there other projects similar to this in other parts of the world, or is it the first project sort of developing these signs for specifically communicating about the ocean?
In the world, no. In Colombia, yes. Actually,
Okay.
in the region, there is a lot of, maybe a couple of projects about, but it's inclusive in all sense with blind people, deaf people. But and there's another, I don't remember where, but it's not the only in the world, but it's the only in Colombia.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's the first time I heard about something like this. So okay, we have another question from Natalie Fox. So I think either one of you or both of you can answer this if you want to. So do you have any advice for coming up with new styles of communicating or creating strategies that have never been done before? How can we balance creativity with having engagement targets, especially if it is working on a new project, campaign, community, or audience? Any ideas there?
I don't know, Isabella, do you want to add? I can just maybe say something very quickly. That's
sure.
a very good question, and I should say that I'm quite new in this area of science communication, although I very much I'm very much curious and interested about it. Maybe one thing that I found useful, and sometimes this is challenging because we live in a world where things are always very fast and we have milestones and things we need to achieve. But I think, at least from our project, the fact that we were able to do it in the course of, and it's still happening and undergoing, the project is going to be in the end about 1 year, a bit more. This was something that I found very relevant because people were able to reflect upon these issues of the ocean. They were able to think about kind of take home after these workshops and continue to reflect on these issues and then come back. So the time of it I found was very useful for an actual awareness. I mean, it's something that all these processes that are maybe a bit different from the more conventional processes that we usually do, I do as well. So in terms of communicating and giving information many times in a presentation format, etc. So I think that not only some of these processes, but also the time that it takes, I think it's useful for a more effective awareness, if you want, or more in-depth thought on these issues.
Yeah, for sure. I think that anytime you're creating something new, it does take more time than something that's sort of more well known. So particularly these art science collaborations. So yeah, I guess that can be tricky if you have also the engagement targets, but maybe, you can use some traditional forms of communication medium to meet your targets while being creative, more creative in the background, developing new tools that might take a bit more time. Yeah. And Isabella, do you have any ideas on that one?
Yeah, maybe I just a little bit. Well, maybe knowing the target audience is the key, the context, the knowledge reality, and challenge ourselves to think out the box. Maybe more human strategies that it's important, maybe just to answer that question.
Yeah. All right, so we have another question from Sergi for Andrea, and she asks, so you told us about the origins of your project and the 3 people who drove it, but from a practical point of view, how did you go about making this project possible, and were you able to get funding to organize this?
Yes, that's a very good question. So it's important to say that this is a pilot project and that was only able to happen really because we had the support of the local music school. So in terms of materials, instruments, spaces, as well as the whale watching company, which provided the equipment to record the actual sounds as well as the boat trips. And so this was a decision from the 3 of us that we wanted to really start the project. But the project, so it's in-kind funded if you want. And because this was so new for all of us and was really a test and we were very excited about it, we decided to undertake this project. But in the future, it would be essential to have financial support and to be able to apply to some funding so that we could continue to develop the project, because I think one of the things that I think it's interesting is because it is a project with the community, even if the processes and the general approach to the project is the same, the outcome, so the final performance will always be different because of people's stories and people's relationship with the ocean as well, which either positive or negative or both, people that live in an island for sure have. I mean, there's no, they have it and they have stories to tell.
Yeah. And did you find that the musicians also were they people that already had a big awareness about the ocean, or did they learn a lot in the process?
They learned a lot in the process, which was very interesting. Sometimes, I mean, maybe this happens with all of us when some friends come to visit in your own city and you end up discovering new things that were there all along. And it's a bit the same with the ocean. So I think for many people, this contact with just going out to the ocean, listening and seeing these species was something new. And so for everyone, I think everyone learned a lot about also about historical and cultural aspects of cetaceans in the Azores, of the whole whaling history and the process from going through whaling to whale watching, which is also a very interesting case, particularly to the Azores. So yes, I think it was very new for them as well. And this idea that the ocean is not such a quiet place as maybe we can initially think that it is. And also the awareness of all these issues, particularly noise, but other issues, of course, as well. So this was, yes, it was new for them.
Yeah, yeah. And also going back to the issue of the funding that Sarah Sergi mentioned. So at the European Marine Board, we have an artist in residence program, and we're releasing a new call on the 9th of January for artists and scientists to work together to develop projects like these, actually. So it can be quite difficult to find this kind of funding, as it's a bit more out of the box, but I think there's more and more interest emerging in really working between arts and science. So yeah, if anyone's interested or knows anyone, then keep an eye out on our newsletter and social media. So I have another question, a more general question, because this session is about leaving no one behind. So I'm curious if either of you have any other ideas about how to make ocean science more inclusive for other minority groups and not just for deaf communities. Any ideas? Maybe Isabela?
Well, maybe we are called to generate more content that the blind people or deaf people can access to. And I think that that's the idea, leave no one behind. The ocean, the education about the ocean and the knowledge is not an exclusive stuff for all those who, as I said in my presentation, near to the coast or use all the senses.
Yeah, I think
that.
Yeah, I think it's important to have as many, as many different formats for accessing information as possible, to reach as wide a community, as possible.
And as I say, under the water, we all communicate in sign.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. But I will open up the floor now in case anyone actually wants to speak, to ask a question in person. You can just raise your hand if you want to say anything. Do you have any questions for each other, Andrea and Isabel? And then we'll go to Jamie. Or I'll let you think if you have any questions for each other. We'll hear from Jamie first.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me properly?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Now, just wanted to comment on your last question that you asked, like, what could we do to include the minorities? And I think an important point there is to actually like take them into account when we're like preparing, like, like build our networks so that we can have in those networks members of those minorities, because that help us as people who are like preparing these kind of actions to know actually their needs. So I think one thing we lack sometimes, at least we hear, I'm from the Institute of Marine Research, sorry for not saying before, from the Spanish Research Council here in Vigo, so Northwest Spain. And here sometimes when I'm trying to like think of activities or actions to do, I try to make it inclusive, but sometimes I don't know what inclusivity means for some minorities and I don't know their needs. So I think it's important that we have that into account and trying to build these connections with people from those minorities. And then from there, we can build on like making better activities and more inclusive activities. And I think you, Andrea, or Isabela, or probably both, like you both did that, like contacting with those minorities first. And I think that's a key step, so that the more diverse we have our network, the more inclusive we could be, like when we're like preparing the actions and stuff like that. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. That's definitely very relevant. Yeah, I think for sure, having more awareness about diversity and inclusion is an important place to start. Yeah. So any further ideas from Andrea or Isabel on that point? I have a question from Maria Vittoria Mara. She says, can only artists apply for the EMB's Artist in Residence program, or also projects similar to the one described by Andrea? So it can be projects described by described by Andrea, but actually it is the artist that has to apply. But they should be already in contact with scientists that they want to work with, but the grant is actually for the artists. Okay, so is there anyone else that has a question? Otherwise, I think we can, yeah, we started the session a bit early, so we have a question from Eike. Okay, thank you, Eike. So he says, of course, some target groups like lower educated people in society are super important to include in science communication. This is not a minority at all, but they are, for instance, people with certain setbacks in some way. Could the speakers or other listeners share ideas on how to include them? So how to include specific groups such as people with lower education levels in science communication. Any ideas on that? I think it's tricky, but maybe yeah, Eike, do you want to say a few words on that?
Yeah, maybe I was inspired by the drive, for example, Andrea and Isabella showed to include really small groups, but in the same, for example, in my work we discuss often like how to reach out to certain groups, people that are maybe more open to step in the traps of misinformation and this kind of, but that's actually very large groups. And I thought maybe this inspiration of the passion of the two examples, or the way you sort of look at these target groups, could inspire also us working on these large challenges. That's also, I was just thinking, because you have this experience with working full of passion for these groups.
Yeah, maybe I can just add that this is a very good point. I think this being able to work in smaller groups where people get to meet each other in a way that in larger groups becomes challenging, and they all feel that they're a part of something that's important and that they care about, and this interaction becomes much closer in how people exchange ideas and exchange thoughts and experiences, and I think that's very effective. The issue of being a smaller group. About the inclusion aspect, yes, I'm going to say something that's very obvious, but for us, what worked as well, because we open to the entire community, but we also had this issue of, are we reaching, you know, not necessarily everyone, but people that struggle maybe with the channels of communication that we're more used to. And what helped was to reach out to already institutions that are doing this work and use those networks and start with that. But that's a very good question, and yes, I will leave it to other people as well for their contributions. Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah, I like the fact that you said, so the way you work with them are sort of small settings. Like it could also be classes in like the poorer neighborhoods, big cities or something. But then you have the setting that the kids, for example, are familiar to, and then you can go quicker in depth, I guess, with them. And yeah.
Yes, that is true. I think another aspect which I found interesting was to be able to, especially the students, make the students involved in a project that's not very school related. sometimes I mean, many of the workshops took place in the music school, so there's an environment that they already knew. But we are now moving the following workshops, for example, to the place where we will have the final performance, and so there will be more interaction with this group. And I think that this is also an important aspect for students, at least, to change a little bit their environment and be involved in a project that it's not a school activity. I think this is important.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrea and Eike. I think, Nancy, did you have a question as well? No. I saw you had your hand up, but yeah, maybe you're not there anymore. And do you have any ideas on that last conversation, Isabela?
Well, maybe just add something that, as I said before, you have to know the reality of the public. When you're making more human strategies, you must start by creating a relationship and try to discover what's the best tool to be closer. Not to be alone, get support from other professionals and other institutions that are making the same job, maybe. And in our case, for example, Laura, the leader of this project, she's deaf and she has a degree in biology. But also when we had our exchange of experience, although they were all deaf, they did not have the same educational level. And for example, some of them had not even be able to finish the school. And it was a huge, huge challenge for us because we started from zero to make that experience work.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So are there any other questions from the audience? Anyone that wants to say anything? No. Okay, in that case, I think we can go a little bit early to the break because we also started a little bit early. So I would like to thank our speakers today, Andrea and Isabela, for your very interesting talks. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you back at 3 o'clock. We'll have the final session on opportunities for public engagement with 2 further talks and also discussion time. So thanks everyone for joining. And I will close the breakout at 12:30, and then everyone will be put back into the main plenary room. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all. Have a nice day.